Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. As we prepare to usher in another year, yep, it's only 4 months away, the digital terrain remains continuously evolving. And with cyber threats lurking at every corner, and the cloud increasingly becomes the backbone of business operations worldwide, cloud security significance has skyrocketed. And Gartner's prediction of global spending on public cloud services have escalated to nearly $600 billion this year. So how do businesses stay vigilant? How do they safeguard themselves amidst this influx of technological advancements? Well, to answer these burning questions, I'm joined by industry stalwart Nico Popp from Tenable, the leading exposure management company. But not only that, he's a great guy. Now, Nico's going to be joining me today to shed light on the upcoming hacker trends, dive deeper into the cloud-based security challenges, and provide a roadmap for firms to help fortify their cybersecurity defense mechanisms. But enough spoiling for me. Buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to San Francisco, where Nico is waiting to join our conversation today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Oh, yes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Nico Popp. So I'm a Chief Product Officer at Tenable. I've been at Tenable for 2-3 years, in security for 20-25 years, forever. I'm an engineer by training, and then I'm really a product guy by passion. So that's me in a nutshell.
Love that. And there's so many reasons I was excited to get you on the podcast today. And given your extensive background in cybersecurity and Tenable's unique vantage point in the industry, I've got to ask, what do you anticipate as the top hacker trends businesses should prepare for in the upcoming year? Because we're only 4 months away from 2024 already, so it's time to start looking at those trends that might dominate next year. Anything that you anticipate?
You bet. First, how much time do you have? I usually put these things into 3 categories. Yesterday's attack that are still relevant. Today, what you can expect in the short horizon and then the longer horizon. So the same old is, nation state. I think China is way ahead of the pack in terms of investment, leveraging 0-day. So what for you, VPN? Basically, and patch, right? But they're pretty good, and they're going after your intellectual property. Ransomware still there, right? That's for organized crime. It's funny, I was talking to a real estate agent on Friday, and I don't know if you're familiar, in the US, we have something called the MLS. It's where we list all the real estate thing. And she told me, oh, we had some kind of attack, cyber attack. We've been down for 2 weeks, so I can't give you any data. Apparently, they're negotiating some kind of ransom. Seriously, right?
Oh.
Wow. So it was like, oh my goodness. So watch your Active Directory, make sure you have MFA, back up your data. That is not going away, right? The Active Directory is universal. So start doing some security there. And then we get into the fun stuff, right? For the product guy, I think, if software is eating up the world as it is, open source is ruling everything. So, software supply chain attack, like SolarWinds, right? I think are going to be on the rise. If I was a hacker, that's what I would, it's so easy to implant something, right? To mark with this open source software, I would do that. And then, of course, the long-term horizon, right? Gen AI, if that's the new user interface to business apps, and you will be, these things are biased, they hallucinate, prompt injection, the copyright issue, compliance issue, exfiltration of data. I think even your prime minister was talking about it, right? He's calling for a big meeting on trust on AI. So I think cyber is not going away. That's the news for 2023, 2024, 2025, and keep going.
Yeah, 100% with you. And I suppose we can also put on that pile cloud vulnerabilities, especially as companies increasingly migrate to cloud-based solutions. Where do you see the most common vulnerabilities there, and how do these pose threats to businesses' most sensitive information? Because I imagine that's what's keeping people awake at night.
Yeah. Cloud security really started 5 years ago, but now we're in the real business phase. So customers tend to start with misconfiguration as vulnerabilities. I think it was Palo Alto 2-3 years ago. They did an experiment, right? They went in and misconfigured, on their own, right, a resource, a workload on AWS, and they waited. Took 5 minutes. 5 minutes for that misconfiguration to be used and for the bad guys to break it. So misconfiguration is usually where you want to start. That's the easy bit.
And also, I think many businesses, they look at their cloud environments and they're just bewildered sometimes with the complexity, thinking they've built things on top of things and how did we get here? But with Tenable's new release for unified cloud security posture management, how does this simplify the complexity that often comes with managing multi-cloud and hybrid environments?
Yeah, so we'll talk about misconfiguration as the starting point, but in cloud and everywhere else, you actually have 3 types of vulnerability. Let's call them exposure, findings, weaknesses. So misconfiguration, privileges, right? Overextended privileges or unused privileges. That's still kind of misconfiguration in a sense. And then you still have software vulnerabilities, right? In your open source software, in your operating system, in your workload, in your container, et cetera, et cetera. So you really need, when we say unified, you really have to discover the 3 types of vulnerability, right? The 3 types of security findings. And you have to do that very precisely. And because it's overwhelming, really overwhelming, right? You could have large enterprises have millions of resources in the cloud. So and thousands, seriously, we've seen customers with 10,000 AWS accounts. Let me repeat, 10,000. How can you have 10,000 accounts, right? So there's so much complexity that the name of the game became not only you discover, but you have to prioritize. You really have to tell them these are the risky ones. This is really what matters, and that requires your attention. You have to dumb it down because it's so broad. But that's what unified is. It's you do it for all the vaults across all the cloud, and you prioritize. These are the critical few.
And just to bring that to life a little there, we're talking about simple misconfigurations, excessive privileges being the root cause for the majority of cloud breaches these days. So can you walk me through how the Tenable solution helps company quickly identify and rectify these issues before they lead to serious breaches?
Yeah, so back to the unified, right? You find all of them. And what's interesting, you mentioned breaches. It's never one vulnerability that kills you. It's that combination. So, contextualizing these vulnerabilities, this one matters because, you have high privileges and this workload is sitting on the internet, right? That's called context, is super important. I'll give you an example. The infamous Capital One breach, right? How did that lady come in? She come in because there was a software vulnerability in the WAF. She exploited that to get onto the WAF. Once she was there was a privilege, right? Abuse of that WAF had privilege to actually talk to the data, which it should never have. So she was able to capture an authentication token to then talk to basically S3 buckets, right? With PII that was encrypted, but she had the privilege to decrypt the data. Now, third vulnerability, the S3 buckets was actually configured to let the data egress basically to the internet. So it's really the combo of these things that kills you in terms of breaches. So what we do, we actually start, we have something we call attack path analysis, where we do the math, we do the analysis that a hacker would be doing and say, hey, if I combine this misconfiguration, software vault, privileges, over privileges, then here's a path to actually breach you and steal your data. So that's kind of that's the big idea to contextualize. By the way, that's what we call exposure management, right? Don't just focus on misconfiguration, vulnerability. There's tons of them. Focus on what matters because you can be breached if you don't address them.
And I think everything we're talking about here today highlights the need to shift from a reactive threat detection to preventative cloud security posture management. So can I see you dive a little bit deeper into this concept and explain how businesses can make that a transition effectively? Because again, for many business leaders, it sounds great in principle, but getting there is what they find a little bit overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, well, look, it's obviously our credo. We are the preventive security guys at Tenable. It's a little bit of a mindset, right? It's a little bit like if you look at how we spend money in cyber, I would say 80, maybe 90% goes to reactive security. I've been breached. I want to detect that I've been breached and I need to react, right? It's a little bit like in real life, going to the ER, right? You're sick. So you're going to the emergency room, right? I call it going to the EDR because basically you're sick. It's too late. What you really want to do is have the discipline, right? To eat your veggies, go to the gym, be in shape, right? Preventive medicine, we know, pays huge dividends over reactive medicine. So it's the same idea, right? Let's look at all the vulnerabilities, all the weaknesses, all the exposure in our cloud, but also in our identity infrastructure, in our software supply chain, right? All over the place. And then let's take a proactive stand to actually address the one that matter, right? Now, you need the tools, you need the mindset, but you also need the tools. And that's, this is what in Tenable has been championed under the category exposure management. The idea is to bring all the vulnerability together, right? All the exposure, all the weaknesses across the attack surface to make sense of them and to tell you what really matters. So mindset and also a new platform are emerging, right, to facilitate that preventive, proactive stand.
And one of the features highlighted in Tenable's new CSPM solutions is continuous discovery and assessment. Again, really highlighting that need for a proactive approach. So can you explain how this feature benefits businesses, especially when it comes to both managed and unmanaged cloud accounts?
Yeah. So look, it's a few things, right? You have to be continuous. Remember my Palo Alto example. In the cloud, there is so much automation. Everything has API. Everything is programmable. You have to be continuous. There is no choice, right? Because within 5 minutes, remember, you would be breached. So you need that awareness. Now, there are changes at the speed of light, right? At the speed of code. And you cannot react to everything. So you really need that contextualization, that prioritization to tell you, forget about this, forget about that, right? 95% you can forget about. The 5% that needs your attention. That 0.001%, that's what can actually put you on the headline of The Guardian, right? So you need to react to that. So it's really this idea of, yes, continuous, fine, unified, find all this vulnerability, but really contextualize and explain to me why this is critical, because you still have humans that have to do work. You have to convince them. So one cool thing that we should have Black Hat is using GenAI to explain in plain English, right, how the combination of these vulnerabilities will equal to a breach, because they can be very intricate, very complex. So it's all that whole process, right, that makes a difference.
And at the very beginning of our conversation, you talked about the importance of patch, and also the dangers of misconfiguration. We've probably both been saying that for over a decade, and configuration drift can be a significant challenge for businesses. So how does Tenable's solution automatically detect these drifts, and how does the capability translate in that final stage of better cloud security for companies?
Okay, great. Now we're going to geek out.
Yeah.
In cloud, there's something called, in cloud, everything is programmable. So, you build your infrastructure based on code, right? It's called infrastructure as code. Things like Terraform, CloudFormation template, and so on and so forth. So what Tenable has developed is the ability to read, right, this blueprint for what's going to be deployed in production, and read and scan the infrastructure as code, the IAC as we call it, to find this misconfiguration. So even before the infrastructure exists, we can tell you, okay, your blueprint is wrong, right? It's vulnerable. So fix X, Y, Z, and we'll help you do that. So that's kind of, now you have a baseline. Now you deploy in production, and you can be sure that Joe, Paul, Bob, right, are going to make changes. So where it becomes interesting is to measure the changes from the initial blueprint that you had approved as minimal risk. So that's what drift, right, is. How is your infrastructure, configuration, software vulnerability, because people will pop up new workload, new containers, new Kubernetes clusters, right? What new vulnerabilities are being introduced with respect to the initial blueprint that we thought was safe? And we do that automatically because we scan on the left and we also scan on the right, and we reconcile these two images, what you really have in production versus what you expected to have. We find the vulnerabilities and we'll prioritize. So we'll give you that beautiful drift from where you thought you were. Oh, that was definitely geeking out.
Yeah, we can keep that going because you are the Chief Product Officer at Tenable, which is an exposure management company. And for people listening that may be outside of the security space, maybe they're in the C-suite or a business leader, and maybe unfamiliar with the term, can you just explain the concept of exposure management and how it differs from traditional cybersecurity approaches? And furthermore, how does it align with the future of cybersecurity in a cloud-dominant era? And feel free to nerd out on this one too.
They're really, so by the way, it's a new category. Right? Yep. It is a new category. We think it's actually, I call it the last platform. You have SASE, you have identity, you have XDR, mostly reactive security. So it's really a platform for preventative security. And there are three big ideas. Like my granddaughter would say, I'm three. So 3 big ideas. First idea is really a business idea. It's this idea of consolidation of preventive security. You mentioned CSPM for cloud. Obviously, software, traditional vulnerability management, OT security, application security, Active Directory security, ITDR, as I'm going to call it. So bring all the preventive security market that are somewhat fragmented into a single data platform to run analytics, to prioritize, to expose, your breach path. That's the first idea. It's like we're going to consolidate all these vendors, which basically for the CISO is an ROI value, right? Because the more you buy from one vendor, less complexity, economy of scale, right? Volume discount. That's idea number one. Idea number two is, okay, great. Now you have that full view on all your vulnerabilities, including public cloud. That is overwhelming, right? That is overwhelming. So we really need you to help you operationalizing, right, that exposure management. What does it mean? Prioritize, contextualize, right? Prioritize and help me remediate. You mentioned patching. Help me with the workflow, the remediation workflow, the patching and all these things. But also tell me what I can ignore. Give me my critical and my high. Tell me what I can ignore. Okay, across the attack surface. My critical and high CSPM, my critical and high software vulnerability, my critical and high in OT, my critical and high in my software supply chain. That was idea number 2, operationalizing. Here's the big idea. Idea number 3, right? Idea number 3 is really raising the game. It's really about excellence in security and making everybody much better at security than we are today. And the idea is, if you look at exposure management today, or CSPM, supply application security, vulnerability management, you could argue a lot of it is compliance, because people will say, give me my critical and my high, give me my critical and my high, give me my critical and my high. My AppSec team will fix it. My cloud team will fix it. My VM team will fix it. Very compliance driven. So let me give you an example I use in the US, because in the US, they love their truck, right? Everybody has a truck. Everybody loves their truck. So I tell them, a critical vulnerability, right? Exposure, right? It's like take a bald tire. Imagine you have a truck with a bald tire. If you're doing compliance and you have a fleet of trucks, say, I'm going to fix all the bald tires because it's a critical vulnerability, right? Now think, if that truck is decommissioned, sitting on the garage, right? Not used, that bald tire is not an exposure. You don't have to fix it. Now, clearly, if you use it to drive to the office every day, you better fix it right now, right? That's the basic idea of exposure management. If I can show you that, you have that software vulnerability in the public cloud. But this one, by the way, on that workload is deep inside the network. It has EDR. There is a WAF in front of it. You don't need to fix it. This one, on the other hand, is sitting on the internet, exposed to the internet, as really privileged access. So if it gets compromised, the attacker will have this privileged access, and now they have access to your database. That one you need to fix. So it's this idea of context being a game changer to raise our game in security, so we move off compliance to real cybersecurity that will stop the bad guys and make it much more difficult. That's that third big idea, right? So ROI, consolidation of vendors, operationalization will make it easier. Let's work for you. 3, we're going to make you much better at cyber. Right? That's the big ideas behind exposure management. That's the Tenable story. We call it Tenable One.
And we covered so much in a short amount of time there, from automated cloud-to-cloud drift detection to enhanced reporting and collaboration and so much more. And we've also talked about a lot of very serious issues, but I want to end on a happy note now. And you're a product guy, you're a tech guy, an engineer guy at heart too. So I'm going to ask you to look back throughout your whole career, because I suspect you picked up a few stories along the way. So what is the funniest or most interesting story that has happened in your career?
This one is very personal to me. Do you have kids, by the way, Neil? Do you have kids?
I do indeed, but they're all grown up now, I'm afraid.
Yeah, they're all grown up. But I remember, I'm sure you've been in that industry like me for years and years. Yeah. I have a daughter and a son, but my daughter, like when the daughter turns teenager, like 13, like 4, right? And really, you have no respect at home, right? Nobody cares about what you do at work. And, I was already, I was shipping product. I was doing this, that. Nobody cares. And then, Dad, you are boring. That was very much, we don't care about what you do. And then one day I told my daughter, when I was like, and I was looking at what she was doing, I said, when you download that iTunes song, this is my software that's running, because I used to be an X. I wrote web objects and they still use it for the, the iTools. And she said, no, that this is badass. So after 30 years in the industry, and the only thing she knows about her dad, and she remembers, and actually, is that her dad is badass because he basically, for some reason, which is not even true, wrote the whole iTunes experience. So look, I took the badass status at home since that day, and I'm going to keep it. And I think that's going to be the story that stays with me, whatever, I keep doing in that industry.
What a great story. Absolutely love it. And I think you're going to continue to be badass when this podcast goes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Yeah, you're going to be there. So for anyone listening that just wants to find out more information about Tenable, connect with you or your team, etc., where would you like to point everyone listening?
Yeah, well, look, there's always the website, right? Tenable.com. I have to say we're pretty active on LinkedIn. So, if you want to connect, right, Nico Popp, npop at Tenable, or Nico Popp at Gmail. There's not a lot of Nico about LinkedIn in security, so you'll find me, and you'll find also connect to Tenable, and you'll get all the good words of wisdom and some cool marketing too. We have these very cool mountains and yetis, right, to help you with your attack surface. See us there. Find us there.
Well, I'll add all the links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. As I said, covered a lot there, from hacker trends for the next year, cloud-based security issues, how companies can protect themselves from cyber threats, and also defining exposure management. But more than anything, just leaving us with that cracking story about being a badass. I think it's a perfect moment to end on. But just thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Neil.
A huge thank you to Nico Popp from Tenable, a.k.a. Badass, for providing such a comprehensive overview of the landscape of cyber threats and cloud vulnerabilities. And with cloud environments in perpetual flux, I think Nico's emphasis on transitioning from mere reactive measures to a proactive exposure management, I think that is the critical takeaway from our conversation today. And Tenable's new offerings, especially their unified cloud security posture management, I think that's testament to their commitment to ensuring that businesses can better navigate the cyber world with greater confidence. And for anyone interested in diving a little bit deeper in that, I urge you to check out their recent press release, which provides an even better understanding of their strategies and solutions that are tailor-made for multi-cloud and hybrid environments. And remember, in our digitised world, staying one step ahead in cybersecurity is paramount. So please keep tuning in to Tech Talks Daily for more enlightening sessions like this. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask me or today's guest, or you just want to connect with me, Twitter, LinkedIn and all the social channels at Neil C. Hughes. Email address techblogwriter@outlook.com, and my website if you'd like to work with me, techblogwriter.co.uk. But that's it for today, so just a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.